everybody, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you how to paint these colorful autumn leaves. Now, real quick, if you're looking for a beginner, real-time, step-by-step fall leaves tutorial, I've got you covered. I filmed one last year, quick and easy, real time for the beginners, so I will link that up in the iCards and in the description box down below as well, so you can check that out if you're interested. But today's video is not going to be for the total beginners. I'm painting from life today, which I always suggest that you do instead of a reference photo whenever you can, because it's going to be a completely different experience. I've got these crispy, crunchy fall leaves from my backyard that I'd love to make a study of, so let's get started. Grab your paints and your brushes and join me for today's tutorial, and don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more videos. And leave me some comments and some suggestions down below for what kinds of tutorials and videos that you would like to see next on this channel. Don't forget that all of the materials and supplies that I use will be listed in the description box down below as well. Now let's get started. Alright, so to begin, I'm working on the Arches 100% cotton 140 pound rough paper. I'm using this paper because I filmed a review on the rough press, which I will link up also in the iCards and down below if you're interested. But in general, my paper recommendation would be their cold press, 100% cotton paper no matter what brand you get, because cheaper wood pulp or cellulose fiber papers, like I'm thinking for example the Strathmore 400 series papers, they don't interact the same way with the paint and cannot achieve the same results that you're seeing here. They are also notorious for uneven drying, so if you're ready to improve your art skills and step up your game, definitely upgrade your paper. 100% cotton, the Arches paper is truly my favorite, the cold press. Starting off with my sketch of the leaves, I've applied masking fluid to the veins of the leaves to preserve the whites of my paper and allowed that to dry completely. After that, I applied gum arabic and water solution in the form of a wash to the leaves, and I started dropping in the local colors I identified within the leaves. The reason I'm using gum arabic in my wash water is because I want to slow the drying time and control the spread of the paint. Not only will this increase the open time that I have to blend in the paint, but it will get me a different effect with the salt, which I'm using here. By slowing the drying time down, these little hair-like structures begin to form in the paint. So I'm dropping in, sprinkling in that salt while the paint is still wet to achieve the desired effect. Now remember, because we used gum arabic in the wash solution, it will take longer to dry, so be patient. You don't want to use a heat tool or any kind of a hot hair dryer to speed up the drying time anytime that you apply mask fluid, because it could melt into the paper and become permanent or incredibly difficult to remove and tear the paper. That's another reason you don't want to apply too much gum arabic into your wash, because again, it will slow the drying time. So here I'm using about 1/3 gum arabic to 2/3 water mixed in a little flour well dish. So that, you know, I don't always use it, but I did use it here. And again, too much gum arabic will also make it difficult to add more layers and glaze effectively on top, so do use caution there. So after that has been allowed to dry completely, coming in with my next layer on top, I was careful to gently remove the salt without removing the mask fluid. This is very important. And then glazing layers on top. One thing I wanted to mention is I'm not adhering strictly to my reference here. While I am dropping in colors I see represented within the leaves, I'm also punching up those colors quite a bit and making changes to improve upon the reference. I don't want you to ever feel shackled to a reference image. Certainly you do need one to paint realistically, but I'm not feeling pressure to be a copy machine in that, oh, if I see a little red there, I have to put red there. Or if I see a little green here, add that in the exact same spot. No, In areas I see brown, I may decide to go with a violet or a burgundy or even a dark navy blue. Whatever colors I feel are going to best bring the image to life and I feel are going to be the most expressive as well. So you have that liberty to make creative changes and improve upon reality. It's like Van Gogh once said, we must rebel against the photograph, which is a relatively modern and new invention at that time. If you want an exact copy, you could just take a picture. But we paint paintings to capture a feeling and to improve upon reality. We paint paintings to capture a mood, an essence, to tell a story, to express something. Use your reference as a starting point and improve on it. And you do need a reference, whether it's a photo or a still life. Don't ever let anyone tell you to just paint from your imagination, especially if you're working in realism. And especially when you're just starting out. As an artist, I often pull from my imagination a lot, but that will come later when you have a lot of experience. But you still need a reference to render realistic details accurately and paint from life whenever you can, because it's a completely different experience versus a photograph. So if you're new to watercolor, it may seem odd, the idea of glazing and layering. You may be thinking to yourself, well, can't you get it right on that first try? Well, that's not really what watercolor is about. There are no shortcuts. I'm going in for many layers here. It's always better to start off lighter and continue to glaze layers on top versus just charging in a lot of pigment down on the paper at one shot. Like I said, there are no shortcuts, because when you do that, you're really not taking advantage of the benefits of the watercolor or the most luminous optical properties that make watercolor special. When the light shines down through those transparent layers of paint and bounces off the white surface of the paper and comes back to your eye, it just gives the most rich, multi-dimensional jewel-like glow. So I'm glazing to strengthen up my colors, boost up my contrast, and really letting those colors overlap in places to achieve an effect that can't be rendered in one go. A lot of this has to do with light refraction. So you really have to glaze in order to achieve that depth and luminosity. And I'm finishing off with some more salt here. Remember, it's not about covering up that first layer entirely, it's about enhancing it. Now with those stems, be careful not to make them too thick because they can get out of hand very quick. In fact, mine may be a tiny bit too fat. And don't make them stick straight. Don't make them stiff little lines because that's not going to look realistic. I want to get that graceful gesture, that smooth, fluid line. Remember that there are no straight lines in nature. Here, I'm removing the mask fluid using a natural rubber pickup, often called a rubber cement pickup. You can find these at dickblick.com, Jerry's Artorama. It's a textured piece of rubber, and when you rub it gently across the surface of the watercolor paper, it will remove the masking fluid and any remaining salt. Now, please note, and this is important, only attempt to remove your masking fluid once the paper is thoroughly dry. These natural rubber pickups are just invaluable little tools, especially when the salt sometimes can be very stuck on the paper. These remove it completely. You might say they're worth their weight in salt, pun intended. Now, you can use your fingers to remove the masking fluid, but that's when I think a lot of people start to run into problems with ripping and tearing of the paper, and also smudging the watercolor paint. Just make sure you remove the masking fluid completely. Time to add those shadows and add some visual weight, but also some context so they don't appear to be floating out there in space. Keeping in mind my light source, especially if you're doing multiple leaves, that the shadows make sense. You can't have a light source coming from the left on one leaf and then a light source coming from the right on another leaf in the same painting, because that just doesn't make any kind of sense. I'm wetting out the area under the leaves first, because I want that paint to blend and be very soft and fuzzy. And for those shadows, I'm mixing up a very chromatic gray mixed from the colors I already used in the leaves. You never want to use a tube gray because it will look incredibly dull and it won't be harmonious with the rest of the piece. That is an amateur mistake. Mixing instead allows me to create a very harmonious and believable shadow. I'm mixing this gray more toward the violet, and don't be too concerned if the color from your leaves run into the shadows a little bit, because shadows often have influence of the colors around them. So sneaking in some extra color into those shadows will make them look incredibly lively and fresh. Now going in to work on the veining in those leaves, some are going to be lighter and some will be darker. They aren't all going to be the same, and painting them that way is not going to look realistic. Some are going to be more red, some are going to be more green, some are going to be more subtle and blended and with more feathered edges, more, subdued, and others will be more prominent and sharp in focus. So you really need to be paying close attention to that reference photo because they really are all different. Don't just start adding details for the sake of adding details. No, they need to be accurate. Now, you don't have to add every little thing, and you'll learn from experience which details matter and are important and which ones you can leave out. But the details you do choose to add should be accurate. So this is where sharpening your observational skills as an artist really gives you an advantage. Now just finishing up, making any last minute adjustments, final adjustments, hyping up my contrast, ensuring that I've got all of my values right, adding in any final details and last layers and glazes. Now I tend to reserve my softer brushes for my final layers and finishing glazes, because especially like the Princeton Neptune brushes tend to be my favorite, but any of my softer, more synthetic swirls are going to work best for those last glazes because they're so soft that you can layer very effectively without disturbing anything that you've done underneath, but they're not going to be stiff enough and have enough snap to them to get those initial details or sharp edges. So I tend to think of it kind of like how you would work in pastel. I start with my stiffer, harder brushes, and then I finish with my softer ones on top. In the beginning of the painting, I might start off with something like a Kolinsky sable and then end with something very soft like a squirrel hair brush. And that completes the tutorial. So let me know down below in the comment sections if you have any questions or suggestions on what kind of video tutorials and art lessons that you would like to see next. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up on your way out before you go and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!